Greetings and welcome to Maisha Kazini. Over the last 8 years, when I've been talking about competency-based education, curriculum, whatever, one of the things I noticed is that Kenyans were really seduced by the advantages they thought they were getting from CBE. But many of the times I would explain that they had implications for the minds of our children. And then Kenyans would wonder why I don't want children to have fun and why they should not learn practical skills. And then just last week, it occurred to me that the problem is that we don't see education as also psychological. So we don't see the psychology that is behind our education system and the impact that the education system has on the way we think. So in this video, I want to talk about the psychology of CBE, and what I will be talking specifically about is what psychology is about, what is the psychology of the new education system, and given the implications that I will discuss, I will also talk about what should Kenyans push for. What is psychology about? In general, psychology is defined as the study of the mind and how the mind affects behavior. So the concern of psychology is to find out how can we get people to do certain things by influencing their minds. And actually, psychology got a really big boost in the early part of the century because imperialism wanted to influence people without actually telling them that this is what we want you to do. So there were more scientific studies being done on how we can condition people for an amount of time so that they end up producing the behavior that they want. So there were some very unsavory people behind the study of psychology, but eventually even Black and African people decided that they needed to take control of this subject. So people like Frantz Fanon now started taking an interest in how the colonial structure conditions us to accept to accept oppression. And then the people who are conditioning us say that the problem isn't the way they are conditioning us, but with our minds, like saying that Africans are childish, their minds never grow, or saying things like Africans are predisposed to being oppressed. So when we get these new batch of psychologists like Fanon, they start to say, no, the way Africans are behaving is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. It's the torture, the manipulation, the diseducation of Africans that is producing the kind of mental health problems that we are seeing in the colony. So psychology is mainly interested in how the mind works and how it can be trained to produce certain behavior. And that's why it is so important for us to understand it, because Kenya is a very psychologically manipulated country. So it's important that we understand how psychology interacts with our education system. So for the purpose of this video, this is what I will be referring to as the main elements in looking at the psychology of CBE. I'll be looking at motivation. What is the reason for which we do things? And then I'll talk about impetus. Who is the initiator and the driver of a certain action? And then I'll talk about agency, meaning who are the people who have a choice, who can make decisions and impact the activity that is being done. And I just want to say that this is important. For example, one of the things that really excited Kenyans was the idea that they can fry an egg and grow things. And those things I was saying are things that should be learnt at home anyway, whether it's in the curriculum or not. And Kenyans were wondering, why can't it be, what's the difference? So if we look at frying an egg, for example, if you're frying an egg at home for breakfast with your family, that is different from when you're frying an egg in school. And how is it different? It's different at the psychological level. The motivation for which you're doing it is different. So if you're teaching your kid to fry an egg, you're bonding with your child, you're showing the child how to do breakfast, and also the child is getting excited that they're doing something with you and they're doing something for the family. So that's the motivation. The agency is you, the parent. When you're teaching the child, the person who is driving this activity is you. And the same thing with the impetus, it is coming from you. This initiative to fry an egg in the kitchen with your child, the impetus of the activity is you. But when it's in the classroom, that is completely different. First of all, when it's in the classroom, it's not for your family members. It's for meeting a certain activity in the syllabus so that the teacher can get points for doing the right thing in CBC. The child is also learning how to do this activity with other children. So it's not simply even if they're using the same ingredients, they're not simply learning how to fry the egg, but they're learning how to work with people. They're seeing how other people do it. And they will also see that even though they all follow the instructions, not all the eggs will turn out the same. They will have fun laughing at people's burnt, crispy eggs or whatever. But there are other things that are going on in the classroom that are not in the home. So the agency is for the teacher and the students, it's not for the parent. There's a difference. And then the energy for it is coming from, the idea that you're doing things with children or you're discovering, cooking is not just about cooking at home. So when you're teaching a child to fry an egg in the classroom and at home, it's two different things. But Kenyans thought I was splitting hairs because they couldn't see that the issue here is not the activity, it's the psychology of it. What are the underlying things that are going on when this activity is being done, even though the activity is the same and the child is the same? So for you to get the gist of this video, it's important that you understand one thing. We have to understand that what the government was saying about competency is not what we imagined the government to be saying. So the government could be saying, oh yeah, now your child will do practical skills. For us, we were thinking, oh, our kids can now be independent, taking care of themselves. But that's not what the government was saying. It was saying something else. So it's important for us to understand that there was a difference between what the government was saying and what we were imagining it to say. And for us to see the difference between what the government was saying and what we were hearing, we have to understand it through the psychology. What is the government's motive for giving us competence? What is the impetus of competence? And who has the agency in this curriculum? The other thing that we need to understand for us to get the gist of what I'm saying is what competence actually means. Because people hear competence as ability to do a certain task, but that's not what competence means in education. In education, competence means dividing knowledge into small tasks and then teaching those tasks separately and assessing those tasks separately. So for example, I gave this example about football. To be a good footballer like Ronaldo, you have to be able to run, to dribble the ball, and to do a good header if you're going to score a goal. What competency does is that it breaks up those skills and tests them separately. And then it says, if we see your talent in this skill, then we'll know that maybe you can play football. But that's not how the real world works. Because the fact that somebody can dribble, the fact that somebody can run with a ball, somebody can do a header, doesn't make him a good player when he's on the field with the 10 other people in his team and playing an opposing team with people shouting in the background. It's a completely different ball game. And so what I was saying is, if you want to train the footballer, what you do is give them the opportunity to play and have a proper league. But to say we are going to support football through competencies, that's a way of the government copying out of doing the right thing, which is to build football. So that the children who are playing over the weekends, playing in the local leagues, they can be spotted by scouts and they can develop their talent that way. It's not going to come from competence in the classroom. Competence, as you were hearing, is not what the government was saying. And the way to look at it is by looking at the motivation. Why did the government want competence? It was to control Kenyans' careers. Who was the impetus behind competence? It was the government. The government was now the one that was deciding which skills we should have. And mark you, the government is made up of people who are so rigid, out of touch, and they are the ones who are telling us what are the innovative careers to come. It was such a joke. And then the agency, meaning who is driving this thing, it is not us, it's the government. So that's how to understand what was wrong. What we were hearing as parents is that now it's us who are the center of the education system. Now it's us who choose the skills that we want and we can combine any skills. And now it's us who are in charge of our education. No, that's not what you are being told. You are being told something else. The other thing we need to understand for us to grasp what was wrong, what is wrong with competence, is the assumptions of competence. One assumption is that a person who is going to school will necessarily get employment. And I can't explain how twisted this assumption is. But let me give the example of Australia, because Australia is one country that aggressively implemented competency-based education, but they implemented it at TVET. They didn't implement it at primary school. Because the thing is, with competence, it assumes that you already have the general skills of literacy, thinking, and those things. So when you're being trained for a specific skill for work, it's on the assumption that you've already covered those bases. So and this is the question I kept asking KICD, why are we implementing competence in primary school? But anyway, I was saying this, that competence is for TVET level. And in Australia, they aggressively instituted competence in the TVET system. And this is how it was working. The employers would decide what skills they want. They would go to the TVET and say, we want skill X, Y, Z. Then the TVET designs the curriculum for the skill that the employers asked for and trains the children, not even the children, it trains the students in that skill. Now, what is wrong with that thing? And this has been brought up by the scholars who have studied competence in Australia. One of the problems, they say, is that assumption that the skill which you are teaching in 2025 is still going to be the skill required in 2028. Okay? So if you're training somebody for 3 years, you've been told, train this person in how to manage M-Pesa. Who says that M-Pesa will be the same in 3 years? And this is what is not considered in competence. In competence, we assume that the skill remains stagnant. And if you see my first appearance on NTV about competency, I was saying, why are you behaving as if you can start training a child to be a cook from the age of 4? In other words, they enter the system, you identify, oh, this kid can fry eggs very well, and she stays with that until she's 18, and then comes out of the education system to be a chef. You're assuming that that skill will be needed then, and you're assuming that the child will never develop other interests. It's such an inhuman assumption that we made. This one is just so disturbing for me. We are training kids for jobs from the age of 4. Really? I mean, when we are talking about competency in other countries, they talk about it at tertiary level. That's when you're talking about people joining the workforce. But a 4-year-old, you want to test her for competence. Competence at what? She's not going to have a job. And connected to that is the pathways. We are basically doing the 763 system that I went through, which is telling people in mid-secondary school, this is the career you have chosen and you must go on this pathway. which I think is unfair to children, especially because the workforce is changing so much. If you start preparing a child to be a cook at 4, who says that that job will be there when she's 25? You know, we need to teach kids to be themselves and to be able to read events and change. The point I was making there is that we cannot determine what people will be. The fact that somebody, when they are 4 years old, they want to be a doctor, then when they are 10, they want to be a mechanic, then when they are 15, they want to be a Math3 driver. So now what we are saying is that all that change and learning and development and experimentation, we are saying that the children should not have it. They should decide from when they are kids where they will be, and they stick to that path. That's not human. I've already sort of referenced the second assumption, which is that the skill does not change and the student will not change, which is not possible because people get better at skill as they work, and then also children change. But the assumption of competence is that that change never happens. And then the third assumption is that you can predict what a child will learn and be. What do I mean by that? The fact that I teach 50 children in a classroom, the one person teaching, doesn't mean that each of the 50 children come out with an exactly identical interpretation of what I'm saying. But that's what competency says. That's why it insists that the skills that we are teaching in the system are the ones that the children will use when they get out. That's not how life works. People hear different things, people learn different things, and you can teach the same children in a class in medicine, for example. Some will become golfers, others will become teachers, others will sell fish, others will do whatever. You cannot predict unless, of course, you have a government where you're policing people to stick to their pathways, which is basically what competency is hoping to do. Now, we also need to understand the foundations of competence. Competence is not about knowledge. Anyway, you are told that. But it's also about teaching tasks without context. And in fact, one of the criticisms that came out of the Australian effort of competence in TVET is that what happens is that the students come out not being able to adapt to changing environment because they were taught for separate tasks. And yet what people need is the context. So for example, if I am a mechanic, it's not enough to know how to repair a wheel. I also need to understand the mechanics and the physics of how wheels work. And that can even help me, that knowledge can even help me invent new ways of repairing. What competence does is to remove the knowledge so that that innovation cannot happen. And you've seen it. We were being promised with CBC, oh, the kids will do code, they are going to have tablets and what. But what happened when Rose Jerry built an app to send complaints about the finance bill this year? She was arrested. And that's how the government operates. They don't like innovation at all. And so what they're trying to do is to reduce knowledge to tasks so that it can control what you do, so that you become like a robot. That's what a robot does. A robot receives instructions but cannot make decisions about how to change anything. The other foundation of competence is the constant need for supervision. And that's why you people have more cut marks, you have more homework, and yet you're there celebrating that at least now we don't have exams. I mean, it's so absurd. But there's more surveillance and supervision. And in fact, that's the point I want to make, that competency-based curriculum is a surveillance curriculum. Everybody is surveilling the other. But when you're constantly supervising and monitoring students, it means there can be no creativity because the student has to keep on doing what you're telling them. So even that thing you were saying at you, oh, we don't want exams, then that's exams. Because you're not allowing the children to work outside of what they are learning in school. So there's no creativity that's going to happen with competence. Sorry, that's not what competence offers. And what is the result of this kind of training of competence? Is that the graduate is unable to deal with emerging issues. And they have to be consistently workshopped and retrained for new skills that emerge. And that is more expensive to the worker because the worker has to live. Let's say a worker is trained to make windows for Hondas. And then Honda says, no, we are moving our company to Singapore. So now that skill, what does he do with it? And nobody else is making those windows. They have to retrain for another skill. And remember that this worker probably has a family. He has to put food on the table. Going back to school is an extra expense. So we are basically being tied to companies like this. We are being made to be so restricted to what companies want and not to be able to do anything else outside of what companies want. That's the result of competence. And why is the government doing this? The government is doing this because with competence, they can control work. You see, with competence, once you've broken up tasks into small, knowledge into small tasks, then you can measure the acquisition of the tasks and say, hey, we are successful in training our children. So if we go to the example of, let's say, Ronaldo, instead of taking him to the pitch and seeing how he plays with others, we say we're going to test dribbling, we're going to test running the ball, and we're going to test execution of passes. So after you measure those competencies, now you say that Ronaldo is competent to play football. But is he a good footballer? No, he has to be on the pitch playing with others. And the only way we can know that he's a good footballer is when he's in the stadium. But you see, with the stadium, that's work, more work for the government. They have to answer about KFF. They have to provide training for footballers. They have to provide stadiums. And since they don't want to do that work, they would prefer to say, we have trained footballers in CBC. They can competently do X, Y, Z. So that's why the government likes competence, because it's easier to measure tasks and manipulate people with competence than it is to talk about work. And really what this is about policing work. We are trying to ensure that we control the work people do. That's really what is going on. And I said this at Spice FM some time back. We have a country that has accepted this contract that do exams, get a job. If you try to question this, should it be a job? Can we just have a more open education system? Can our children be able to do things when they graduate without having to fulfill so many regulations? Now there are about 5-6 documents people need to be able to get employment. Even our children who are coming out of the professional degrees, they can't start like lawyers, engineers. They can't start practicing because they have to pay many licenses and all that thing. There's so much gatekeeping, as one young person said on TikTok. There's so much gatekeeping that it's very hard for parents to allow teachers to teach the way we can teach, because then they are worried, is this going to get my child a job? But the problem is the economy, the model of the economy that we have. And also the other issue is when Kenyans innovate, the government first contains them, comes up with regulations, say these people are doing wrong, they are this, they are that. And then when they realize they can't stamp it out, now they start saying, oh, wonderful, now we have Jua Kali. Oh, wonderful, now we have creative economy. But for 20 years, artists were struggling to get anywhere. But now because the government has realized, oops, we can't crush this thing, now they want to embrace it, but they want to embrace it by taxing it. So we have a very reactive political bureaucracy that first shuns innovation for the longest time, makes people struggle, and then when they finally realize they can't do that, now they open it up. We can't have this economy. We have to let people thrive. We have to facilitate them. And then now when we come to the education system, teachers will not be fearing that parents will say, but is my child going to get a job? So what is happening with competence is about the government trying to control how people work. And you even had some of them saying, the CBC supporters saying, we don't want people to be doing architecture and then they become musicians. Who cares? As long as a person is a functional member of society and is contributing to society, that's all that matters. But the government wants to control work so that they can control status, so that the people at the bottom whose parents cannot read all those 50,000 whatever KICD is telling people to read, those kids, they remain at the bottom and they never leave their station in life. And those who already have advantages and have parents who are able to read these things, they carry on those advantages. That's really what is going on, that the government is controlling society. And I said this, it's a class project of ensuring that Kenyans always remain at the bottom of the hierarchy. And even in my conversation with David Hundeyin, he said this.
Be it crude oil, be it creativity, whatever it is, the goal is you must not produce value. You must not capture the value chain or whatever is
Yes.
coming out of you. So even if it's the product of your mind, like music or whatever, the most you should be allowed to do is actually sing the vocals or play the instruments, like, or do the dance or act the movies. That's the most you should be allowed to do. Everything from that level on, every economic value created from above that should be captured by somebody else. It's not for you. Same thing with raw materials. What you should do is extract crude oil and export it. Right? That's the extent of your involvement in the global economy. It's extraction, basically. So the same way they extract crude oil and they extract cashews and tea and they extract gold and cobalt and tantalite and lithium and copper or whatever, manganese. The same way they extract creativity. But the goal is the same thing, that you have been assigned a specific role in the global economy and you shouldn't break out of that role. And unfortunately, a lot of us are very much on board with the program.
And that explains the war on education. For the last 20 years, the World Bank has been telling African countries you're investing too much, especially in higher education. They don't want people to
It's
go
not
to
20 years. It goes back way before. I
uh-huh.
believe it was 1986, the so-called
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Harare Declaration, where the World
Yes.
Bank told African finance ministers that the global economy does not need Africans with degrees.
I think Africans have accepted it. At least in our media, they always say that, degrees are useless, they don't add any value, and that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, that people should do vocational education. And when they say vocational education, they're not talking
Yeah.
about high value vocational skills. They're talking about bead baking and cake baking and, sandal weaving.
So you can see there's a larger agenda. It goes beyond us. This is not just about the government of Kenya. The government is implementing a plan on behalf of others. And I've explained this in my idea of competence, where I say that the idea of competence came from the corporations. They are the ones who promoted it from America to Europe, then through the UN, and then it came to us. So there's a bigger agenda going on, but of course they cannot tell you what I'm telling you. What they tell you is the sweet things, how your kid will be frying eggs and they'll be able to do practical things. And that's why I'm saying you have to understand this whole system psychologically, not just by what you're hearing. And how do they hope to accomplish this through competence? What they're doing is, one, they're giving us more tests. So kids are now doing tests at the end of every year. And supposedly, the idea is to check that the children are getting the skills we had said they would train in. So every time you promise skills, you have to give more tests. So now the children are doing more tests. There are also more forms to fill. Like now, parents they have to use more forms to decide about their children's careers. They have to look at cut marks, the 4 clusters of schools, the 3 pathways, the 500 subject combinations, and then do on top of that a psychometric test where you're feeding the government with information about your child's personality. It is so crazy. But all those forms, in addition to what the teachers are feeling, they're feeling forms about assessment, the interventions in the classroom. There are so many, there's so much paperwork that is being done for this curriculum to work, so that, as I have explained elsewhere, the important thing becomes less that the children are learning and more that the evidence is being produced that the children are learning. That's a bureaucratic curriculum. It's a bureaucratic system of education where the star of the show, the agency, is held by the government and the bureaucrats rather than the children in the classroom and the teachers who are teaching them. The other way in which they are implementing this control is through more control of work and specifically these pathways. Because with pathways, what is happening is that the government is trying to make sure that they pipeline everybody, that you stay in a career that you chose from the very beginning and you don't move out of it. And what is going to happen is that when we finish school, we will not be able to change careers. If, for example, we want to move from the arts to the social sciences, we'll be told, no, you didn't do the right pathway. And if you want to change, you have to go back to your high school pathways. And of course, there's no 40-year-old who is going to go back to high school so that they can change their careers. That is really what is happening. Or you're told because you are in the sciences, you now can't do anthropology. And yet, in medicine, there's a field called medical anthropology. But no, the government doesn't want to hear that. They are saying, oh, you, and the irony is that they are saying, even as they are refusing people to understand this, they are saying, oh, you know, the skills we need are for a new world. We don't know how subjects will be combined. Then why have pathways? So the pathways are really about controlling work and controlling the ability of Kenyans to shift careers. And like I also showed, it's also a way of trying to make sure that whatever new innovations come, they are first controlled by the government in a way that it's the government that becomes the agent of innovation. We cannot develop like that as a society. The agency of development, the agency of creativity has to come from us, the people. Anyway, now I want to go to the specifics of how we are being manipulated through the competency-based education. So I've started here with explaining the current role in, I think, a fairly normal society of the child, the teacher, the government, and the parent. So our children, all we want them to do is to learn and to grow. That's it. We don't want them deciding what they will learn. And it's not that we are dictating, we are trying to expand their view of the world. Because they are children, they don't know what it is. It's our responsibility to tell them. As they are growing, they learn more about the world. The role of a teacher is to teach children. It's not to dictate what children should know, but it's to teach children what the world is about. And one of the problems why we were so susceptible to accepting CBE was because we assumed that when the parents would tell children, no, don't learn that, I'm the teacher, we thought it's because the teachers are dictators. No, it was because of exams. If the teacher has been told that your promotion must come on exam performance, they cannot allow children to know anything outside the exam because her own career depends on children learning what is coming in the exam. So we confused the distortion of teaching with what teachers are doing in Kenya as a problem with teaching in Kenya. Okay, the government's job is to facilitate education. So they provide either the resources, for example, the staff, the books, the materials. That's the job of the government. And then the role of a parent is to raise the child. And I'm going to insist here on something which parents could not understand when I was explaining what is wrong with competence. The role of parents is different from the role of the teacher. The teacher is teaching knowledge and skills so that the child survives in the world outside the school. But the parent is teaching something else. The parent is teaching identity. So through the child knowing their family and their extended family, even the identity as a country, as a continent, we teach our children identity. That's our job. The other thing we help children with is emotional maturity, how to love, how to be kind. What does love mean when you love your parents, when you love your siblings? What does that mean for relationships? That's what children learn from the family, from the parent. And then the other thing that children learn is a work ethic. How do we work? What is our motivation for work? It's not simply employment, it's to help others. So when we cook, for example, we are cooking because we want to feed the rest of the family. We want to enjoy a meal together. So those things cannot be taught by a teacher. But parents were so flattered that now the activities of the family can be part of the assessment of the school system, which is wrong, and I'll explain why it is wrong. So these are the roles that are being distorted by CBE, but I want to explain by talking about 5 things that we really like and that we are doing without understanding the implications. So the first thing under CBE that is problematic is the idea of learner-centered. And I've explained it in another video. The idea of learner-centered, according to the KICD documents, is that, oh, now the children, they are the ones who will dictate how the teacher behaves in class. The teacher has to adapt the curriculum to the needs and the backgrounds of every single child in the classroom. Basically, we are treating the child like a customer who is being served. That's a problem with learner-centered. The other problem with learner-centered, which I explained in that video, is that it was used as a way of disempowering teachers. And this idea came from the US, especially after the fall of USSR. The US decided that now its job is to teach free market economics to all children. And the way to do it is to now talk about the child being a democratic individual in the classroom and to see the teacher as a dictator. So that language of learner-centered is not innocent. It is not what you parents are thinking, that now my child can get individual attention. And why do you want individual attention anyway? The point of a child going to school is so that they can learn to learn with others. So what is this individual service that you're expecting for your child? So that's where Learner Center came from. And then the next idea is parental involvement. Oh, this one, it was so hard to explain because parents were thinking that I am opposing the involvement of parents in their children's education. That's not what I was saying, but I'll explain what the problem is with parental involvement. The other problem is with continuous assessment. I've already hinted on it, but I'm going to talk more about why giving continuous assessments to NEC is a problem. The other thing is the pathways. Again, I've already explained. This was about controlling work and controlling where people go after school. And then the other thing is the amount of data. Oh, dear Lord. People, we are giving so much data about our children and their minors to the government in the name of assessment. So we are not understanding how all these things are distorting the social roles that I have put up there. So with learner-centered, basically we are saying that the child dictates what the teacher teaches. So the teacher is no longer the one who comes to the classroom with instructions from the society on what to teach the children. Now it is the child who has to be pampered, coddled, and taken care of by the teacher. So we are disempowering teachers and we are disempowering adults with the learner-centered idea, and I have more on this channel about that. With parental involvement, now it's the teacher who dictates how the parent is involved in their child's life, and the parent just does what the teacher says. And this, hey, Kenyans. Okay, this is so serious. It just disturbs me. The other day, we met a friend of ours who said he was now going to take his children, I think it was to the museum, because that's what the teacher had said. So he's spending his weekend taking his child to do homework that was asked for by the teacher. Now, remember two things that I have said. I've said that the role of the parent is different from the role of the school. And then remember what I also said about motivation, agency, and impetus. Now, when a parent is taking their child somewhere because of homework that the teacher asked, what is happening there? It means that whatever the parent is doing, the motivation is not theirs. The motivation is the government through the teacher. The impetus is the teacher. It's the teacher who is saying what should be done. And when it comes to the agency, the parent is no longer an agent. It's not the parent who is deciding what to do with the child. It's the teacher who has decided, and now the parent is carrying out those instructions. Now, some of you might say, but what's the problem? I enjoyed going to the museum anyway. But it comes back to what I was saying about the psychology of it. If you, the parent, are the one who says on your own initiative, by the way, let's go to the museum, let me go and show my child what is in there. It produces completely different lessons than when you are taking your child because the teacher has said. And if we continue like this, where teachers are determining what the parents do at home, we are going to have children who do not develop their own intrinsic motivation for doing something, who do not work unless there's a headmaster or a grade to be given to them. And that is so serious. Right now, you can't see the implications, but when your child is 18, seated on the sofa, refusing to get out and go and work on their own, that's when you'll understand why motivation is important. It's important for our children to develop their own motivation for doing things. And if the things we do at home are only what the teacher tells us, like at the beginning, when CBC was starting, parents were reporting that they were being told to make sandwiches at home, take photos, and then take them to the teacher. Surely, people, even if you're making sandwiches at home, it should be for work, for teaching your child how to work, to prepare for a meal, to bond with you. That's what you do that work for. But now, if you're going to not only do it, but take photos and send them to the class, to the teacher, you're basically spying on yourselves. You're giving information about yourselves to the teacher. And you see what the teacher is using that information for is to send to NEC to say, I have assessed the kid, look at them. So you people are feeding intimate information to the government. And you're calling that education. You are spying on your families through the school system. And remember, this competence was not designed by the government. It was designed by corporations. Who do you think is going to be using that data? The government is going to sell it. They even told people when people were opposing, which bill was it, Huduma number. When people went for the public information, the public participation meeting on Huduma number, the government officials said that data is the next oil. So they're going to sell this information about your child, information which your child won't even know the government has on them. That's what parental involvement is. It's a spy operation. You're spying on your families and you're sending the data to the government. Anyway, CBC is here to stay. The next thing, continuous assessment. Wow. Hey, Kenyans. With continuous assessment, now, as I've already explained, continuous assessment was supposed to be the teacher's feedback and being able to input in your child's education. But now it's the government that is deciding what the teacher will do. But why did we accept this idea? The issue was that we didn't understand the difference between continuous assessments and exams. In continuous assessment, if we go back to my model, motivation, agency, and impetus. In continuous assessment, the motivation for the teacher setting the exam is to see if the child has understood what the teacher has taught. So the motivation is improvement of teaching. And then the agency is the teacher. It's the teacher who sets and it's the teacher who uses the results. So they are deciding what to test, how to adjust their teaching. It's them who are the agents of the process. And then the impetus is the teacher. The energy driving the carts is the teacher. And then when it comes to national exams, the motivation, agency, and impetus are completely different. With the national exams, the goal is certification. Meaning what? Meaning that when you do, for example, KCSE, the government gives you a certificate which you can use for employment, you can use to apply for universities, whether in Kenya or elsewhere, because the idea is that the government of Kenya is saying we recognize this person's education qualifications through this certificate. So when a NEC is giving exams, they're doing something totally different from what the teacher is doing giving cards. And then also exams are for monitoring education. It's for the government to look at results from the different counties, the different areas, to match which are the areas that are doing well, what are the factors that make them do well, which are the areas that are doing poorly, and then do bigger interventions to improve the exam and learning of the students. So what we do with CATs is not what we do with exams. But now what has happened is that the government has now become the agents of the CATs. So teachers are no longer the agents of the tests. It's the assessments are being done by the government. And then the teacher is reduced to a bureaucrat. So they provide the assessments and they send the assessments to NEC. So they have no agency. It's not them who are using the assessments. It's because these assessments have become so important that now the government is using them for certification. So you see, the role of assessment has now changed. And then the assessment are also being used by parents to choose the school for the child. Because NEC took over the agency, it took over the motivation, and it took over the impetus of continuous assessments. I hope you can see the irony that on one hand, we were being told that the teachers are going to monitor and respond to the child's needs, but on the other hand, the teachers could not do the assessments. They are not the ones in charge of the assessments, it's the government in charge. And let me explain to you, Kenyans, you were thinking, because you didn't see the difference between continuous assessment and examinations, you were thinking that when assessments are sent to the exam council, they still are assessments. No, they are not assessments. They're exams for all intents and purposes. Because the government will use those results. When your child is leaving high school, the government will be using those cut marks to decide whether the child shall go into what pathway and what pathway. For all intents and purposes, assessments are exams. And I tried to explain that, but people are saying, no, it will be done in the classroom. No, they are exams. Your children are now doing exams every year. And the reason you accepted to convert CATs into exams is because you misunderstood the exam problem. And I tried to explain it in so many platforms that the exam problem was not a curriculum problem, but an economic problem. This is what I said when I was on the Lynn Goge show. What we were told is competency is not competency. But really what happened is that for people to buy into competency, they were told the things that they are concerned about. So like you're saying, you're concerned about creativity, you're concerned about cramming, you're concerned about, the heavy bags and so many exams. So when the project was being promoted, that's what they appealed to. But what I was trying to say throughout my time is that competency doesn't address those things. And then now I had to go beyond that. Why are Kenyans concerned about exams? Exams is an economic problem. It's about lack of opportunities. So people need to pass to get into the few opportunities that are there. You can't fix that with a curriculum. You have to open the economy. Examinations is an economic problem, as I've explained. And one of the stories that was told a lot, which was so misleading during this time, was this idea that the problem with examinations is that my child has been doing well since standard 1 up to standard 8. And then at the time of the exams, either she panicked or she was not feeling well, and so she didn't do as well as she should have. Why should she be held to that exam result without considering that she has always been a good student? I was trying to tell you Kenyans that that's not where the problem is. If exams were not the last resort for anybody, then you would not be worried about what she will score in that exam. But also we were saying, if you want to solve that problem, that you don't want people held to results of one exam when they had been doing well for 4 years or 8 years, what you do is you increase the opportunities for testing and for certification. So that if your child's dream is medicine, and on the day of the exam they didn't do well, what we can provide is, and this was something that we suggested, we can provide testing for entrance into programs. So you have an engineering testing exam, you have an accounting testing exam, you have a medicine testing exam. So that even if she doesn't do well, she can now do a prep course and then retake the exam for entering into medical school. And then she passes that, then now she can enter school. But what the government did instead was to bring the pathways, not even from 4 but to bring them even earlier, so that your career is decided when you're 13 instead of when you're 30. And this is about control of work. So for all intents and purposes, continuous assessments are exams. And not only are they exams, they are also a spy operation, because you're sending things about your child to the government and you don't know how that information can be used or whose hands it can get into. Okay, so the next one is pathways. With pathways, as I've already explained, it's the government that is dictating work. So no longer can your child decide, I was an architect, but I have seen I can sing well, so I'm going to become a musician. The child cannot decide that, because what is going to happen is that the government will say, which pathway did you follow? You should not be here because you didn't do the pathway in high school. And maybe you're telling that to a 40-year-old. Surely. What is this nonsense? And if we go back to our formula, motivation, agency, impetus, what the government is really saying is that they're the ones who decide how careers are chosen and that we should have no say. It's the government who decides the criteria, what are the requirements, and if we decide as we can take the long path round, they will not allow us. So it's about control. And then finally, when it comes to data, we're Kenyans. We are giving data on our children to the government. This thing actually is the one that disturbs me the most. You're sending your child's marks and scores from when they're in standard 3. You see, before, you could be that kid who failed up to standard 8, maybe because the teacher didn't like you or the tests were hard, but at exam you actually perform well. Now you don't have that option. You have to be stuck to your results for the last 3 years or 6 years. And you see, Kenyans, we have to understand what it means to be human. To be human means that we grow and discover new things about ourselves as we grow older. So you cannot hold a 9-year-old to results they scored when they were 9. But now we are sending those exam results to the government, and we don't know who else will have access to them. It's a spy operation. And then now the other one. You parents are doing psychometric analysis of your children and you're giving that data to the government. Ay, ay, ay. And you're not seeing that your children are minors. They don't know the things you're sending to the government about themselves. And when they're 18, 19, they will be being manipulated based on the information that you sent and that the teacher sent to the government. How can we not see that this is a problem? Why do we want the government knowing how our children ate food and cooked in the home and how we did activities? Why are we giving the government this information? And please, you parents are thinking that you're on the same page with the government, that together with the government you're raising your children. No, the government is controlling your child, you're trying to raise them, and you're thinking the two roles are the same. And they're going to use this information to monitor your children even after they leave school. Anyway, CBC is here to stay. Okay, now that CBC is here to stay, you've decided, what are some of the achievable things we can do? And here are some suggestions I'm making. One, if you have understood and accepted, which I would be surprised, but accepted that the motivation for what we do things is important, the agency is important, and the impetus is important, I would say this: be cynical. Be cynical, give the school what it wants, but in your mind, remember not to use it to define your child. So even these psychometrics, I would advise against them. If you can avoid handing them in, do not hand them in. Do not hand in that data in the name of your children. Your child tends to be more social, so she needs to pursue a degree in sociology. And can I just stop the share to say what is wrong with that idea? Hey, Kenyans. You know, that idea of my personality is the one that decides the career, that idea is so anti-political. It's basically saying people get their jobs because of their personalities. It has nothing to do with economic opportunity, nothing to do with the education provided. It's all about the internal life of the child. That's completely ridiculous. And those psychometrics are so Western. Like, I've seen one test, and by the way, there are so many tests on the internet. I've seen one test where they're saying that if you are a person who likes investigation and digging in, you should be a doctor. And if you are a person who likes being social and caring for people, you should be a nurse. Do you know what that means in terms of medicine? It means that the doctors we are training are more interested in using us as bots and as experimental guinea pigs than they are in treating us. And also, it suggests a gender labor division. You're saying that the more aggressive person should be the doctor and the more caring, nice person should be the nurse and should be the woman. I'm telling you, Kenyans, some of the things that we accept, we are not analyzing the underlying cultural beliefs in these things. And you've seen how we were talking about this on X, how doctors can be so callous in communicating like life-threatening diseases and all those things. And now we are endorsing it by telling them that they need no social skills. And yet doctors need to be trained in empathy. They need to be trained in philosophy. Being a doctor is not only about biology. But you see, this is how we are reinforcing these ideas through these funny tests, which the ministry gets from people abroad, and they don't even ask, who are these people and what do they want? So, people, as much as possible, minimize the data you are feeding the system on your child. Please try. Try, don't send photographs, don't send psychometric tests. If you must send photographs, do what people do on Facebook, never show the face. Because you have to find tactics of avoiding giving your children's data to government and to the vendors they will sell your children's data to. So you have to be cynical about it. The second thing I would advise you to do is to constantly ensure that your child is reading books outside the curriculum and listening to stories and is working. And the reason is very simple. Competency is about compartmentalizing your child's mind so that they don't see the connection between different things. That's why your child needs to continue doing stories. Stories are so important. I've said before, take your children to their grandparents, take them to their aunties, let the aunties tell them their stories, and even you as parents, tell your children your stories so that they know who they are. I've been repeating this for so long, but some years back, a parent told me, I listened to you saying that we need to tell our children stories. And one time I realized that my son is always opposing what I said, a young boy. So what she did is that she decided whenever she's instructing her son to do something, she'll tell a story about it. So she'll say, I'm telling you to do this because, you know, one time, so and so did this and this is what happened. She said the son never questioned her instructions again. So you see, children need to understand the environment and the reasons why you're telling them to do things. Do the work. Tell them your story. There was another time my students were doing writing projects, and there was a student of mine who was struggling to understand who he was because his parents came from two ethnic groups, and he was saying, am I a Kenyan? So I asked him the simple question, how did your parents meet? And imagine he didn't even know. You people are not telling your stories. So he now wrote to the dad and said, Daddy, can you tell me how you met mom? And the father was so excited he had not realized that he has not told his story to his child. So he told the child, yeah, I'm so happy you're asking this. This is how we met. So tell your stories. You people, it's because of listening to politicians who are always saying stupidity like, we want development, we are bringing money for development. What matters is that I'm paying hospital fees and what. And what that has done to us, the rest of Kenyans, is that we feel like we have no impact. No, you have an impact at home, and you can have an impact through telling your stories and doing things like working with your child, washing the dishes with your child, going to the shamba with your child. Those things are so powerful. They are more powerful than you imagine. So do them. That is how you fight against competence. You do those things at home with your child. In other words, what I'm saying is that you have to fight to be a parent. Guard your time like a mother hen, like Wakanda. You fight and you be so deliberate that you must spend time with your child. You're the parent. Nobody else is going to be the parent. The teacher can't be the parent. Kenya National Exam Council cannot be the parent. The parent is you. Fight for that time. Do not accept to do homework because the teacher said, now you're spending your weekend doing homework. No, you take them to Shosho, let them go and peel warus with Shosho. That is more learning than a school can ever do. And not in the sense that now she's learning geography by peeling warus. It's a sense that now she's learning to bond, to work, and to have conversation by doing that work with her grandmother. So fight for that time with your child. Do not share it with the school system. And lastly, I think there are three things that need to be removed from the system. One is parental involvement, because it is an intrusion into family life. And it is normalizing economic inequality. Because what is going to happen is that the children who come from more humble backgrounds will be stuck in the careers of their parents. That's not fair. Especially when we remember that the people who are now in power, If you look at their grandparents and great-grandparents, even them, they were just poor villagers, poor natives until the colonialists gave them an education or appointed them to be a clerk. So we cannot have this system where our economic fortunes depend so much on our parents. The point of education, at least we are told, but it's a lie, the point of education should be that it's a social equalizer. It gives us opportunities. But with parental involvement, now children's education, children's career is being decided by the parents and their education and their ability to guide their children's pathways and assignments. The other thing that needs to go is continuous assessments. People, that one has to go. No, you're not supposed to be sending continuous assessments to the exam council. Once you send to the exam council, it becomes the Kenya National Exams Council. So it's an exam. Please don't think that because continuous assessment results are being calculated, it's no longer an exam. It's an exam. And you're disempowering the teacher. The teachers have no say in the curriculum if they can't give assessments and use the assessments to get feedback on whether they are doing the right thing in the classroom. And the other thing that needs to go is pathways. Hey, no, the economy is not like that. But the reason why the government is doing that way is because they need to control our careers, because they are afraid of innovation. They are very afraid of innovation, and so they introduce pathways so that they can control what we do. So that needs to be removed. In a nutshell, this is what I am saying. Competence is about surveillance. Imagine it's nothing else but surveillance. It's surveillance of our homes through parental involvement, surveillance of our performance of our kids through the school system and sending cards. And what is worse is that now, under competence, I don't know if you noticed, nobody's doing what they're supposed to do. The learner is telling the teacher what to do. The parent is being told by the teacher what to do. It's the government that's doing the teacher's work. It's the government that's doing the work of the workers. Come on. The government is not mama na baba. They cannot decide everything. We need the freedom to do what we want, and they need to stop intruding in our homes and in our private spaces, so that they can help us with careers. Those things need to be removed. We need to stop sending data to Kenya National Exam Council. So this curriculum or this education system is a system of surveillance. We are being monitored. Our data is being extracted from us, and we are feeding it to the government, and we have no control over what will happen with that data. I think the second thing to appreciate is that psychology matters. The reason why we do things, the energy behind it, the inspiration behind it, all these things matter. We cannot keep up this thing of saying that the only thing that matters is bread on the table and money in our pockets. And the people who are saying this are wealthy thieves themselves. But you see, that's why they say it, because they know that the only thing that they have over us is money. No, people, as we have energy, we have motivation, we have love, we have commitment, and all those things matter. But that's what the rich are trying to remove from us. So we have to stop bad-mouthing things that we cannot see. The spiritual, the psychological, the intellectual, the mental, all those things matter, and they matter in our children's education. And you see, the psychologists are not going to say anything because they are the ones making money. I'm hearing these psychometrics. People are being charged from 2K up to 50K to do a test on what the kid likes. People, those things are on the internet. Stop giving away money for free. Don't take these things seriously. This is about control. It's not about education and careers. These things do not predict careers. And the reason why they tell us about personality is so that they don't have to answer questions about the economy. And this is my message to grade 9 parents. you people who are struggling with all these information, the real battle here is not for what you are doing. It is the why you are doing it. That's what you need to keep understanding. Because if you don't understand that the motivation, the impetus, the agency, if you don't understand that these things are important, it is going to present problems for your children when they are adults. You must emphasize why your children are doing things, and even you must decide why you are doing these things. But you have to understand that the government is not on your side. For them, this is about control, this is about data, it's about policing work, policing knowledge, policing learning, even the teachers. It's policing everything. So that's what you need to understand. You see, if you're already grounded in knowing why you are doing what you're doing as a parent, you will not panic. You will just say, look, this system is effed up. Let's see what we can do with what we have. Let's consider the resources we have. And then you won't blame your child for choosing the wrong pathway. You'll be able to comfort them if they get disappointed. That's what you do as a parent. You should not be the one telling your child, you see, this is why I was telling you to. No. That's the teacher who does it. That's a government who does it. Your job is to understand why this system is operating like this, to understand that this system is not ideal, and short of fighting for the removal of pathways and continuous assessment and parental involvement, it will be your job to be emotionally grounded and to guide your child through the next stage of their lives. Treat this education system as a parent looking out for the best interest of your child. You're not the assistant teacher, you're not the assistant National Exam Council, you're not the assistant curriculum. Your job is to be a parent and to do the parent's work so that as your child goes through this system, they can still be grounded, they cannot panic, and they can know, yeah, life sucks, but at the end of the day, what carries us through is courage, commitment, and love, which is what we promote at this channel, Maisha Kazini. All the best. I had finished editing this video and was just about to upload it when I remembered there was something that I wanted to add. Some of you ask me, when you see my explanations of what's going on with the school system, you ask me if you should take your children to homeschooling, if you should take them to British curriculum or some other kind of system. If you have been listening to me and you have listened to this video up to this point, and that is your question, then you have not understood a single thing I've said. We are not talking about education here. We are talking about a power grab. The people who invented competency in places you don't even know, for them, competency was never about what your children are learning. It was about how to control your children in the global economy. Where they went to school was a secondary matter. And of course, they're not going to tell you that because you're going to refuse. So they're going to give you stories of how, the economy is going here, and if your child does this, they'll be well placed to have better advantages. All that is nonsense. And it's the same game that foreign school providers are playing. I have explained this on this channel. If you check the first about five videos of this channel, the videos which are specifically on education, I explained the problem of foreign schools and how they distort our own education and our economy and even our politics. And I urge you to listen to my conversation with David Hundeyin, because he attended all the right schools in all the right foreign curriculum, but in the end, he confronted the problem that everybody else confronts. And I hope you've also noticed with the Gen Z protest that the youth who are protesting are from all walks of life. There are those who are failed by Matiang'i in the name of his crusade against exam cheating. There are those who went to group of schools, And there are those who did British curriculum. All of them have realized that they are in the same boat. So let's not be cowards looking for simple solutions. Let's not be like the media who think that every problem has a one single solution that will fix everything. This is not a simple problem, and it cannot be addressed with a simple solution, because the primary issue here is power. Education comes as a second. So you can't run away from this problem. And once again, for the rest of the parents who are in the thick of it, let's continue the struggle. We shall eventually overcome. A luta continua.